I still want creativity. I want my mechanics to be thinking outside the box, even within parameters. And so JAARS has something like 600 acres here, and we have our airport that's right up against a bunch of woods. So the first time I proposed the idea to the administration, they were like, you want to do what? And I said, I want to go crash this plane in the woods and have my mechanics have to fix it. And our pilots are always doing emergency procedure training.
Right.
Our mechanics get none of that. I'm like, have they ever thought about what they would do when a plane might have to go down?
Welcome to Uncharted, a JAARS podcast where each episode we explore a little more of the map of what God is doing around the world. I'm Craig Russell, and I'm really excited to have our guest here, Dave Koostra, with us. I don't know, we're going to be talking about a helicopter, a tent, fixing an aircraft in a remote environment. And this was before Bush Week was ever created. So, Dave, happy to have you on the podcast, and thanks for all your years of service. By way of introduction, Dave and Jan Koostra have served with JAARS for a little over 25 years, Philippines, grew up in Colombia and served in Peru. So you have a pretty broad swath of the world where you've worked as an aircraft mechanic. Thanks for being with us.
Yep.
There's a story I have bits and pieces of, but you actually fixed an aircraft outside the hangar way before Bush Week was invented. So we're going to talk a little bit about Bush Week in this episode and repairing an aircraft off-site outside the hangar. But you actually did that in real time. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so there I was. I love there I was stories because they place you instantly there. There I was in the Philippines sweeping the floor. I'd just seen the helicopter take off about 20 minutes earlier, and one of our pilots, Dick Albright, had taken off with a school teacher and a bunch of chalkboards to fly out to one of our villages, and she was going to be starting the school year there with some new students. And so I'd seen the helicopter take off, and just 25 minutes later, Betty, our radio operator, came over to the hangar. She's like, Dave, Dick just called in with a mayday, and he had to make a forced landing. I'm like, oh, man, that's not good. So I went out to the radio room, started talking to Dick Albright, and got some information. And
that's over HF radio.
Yeah, it's over HF radio. And went and got our other pilot who was there, Mike Maurer, at the time. And we got in the Helio Courier, took the door off the Helio Courier. We got some supplies.
Took the door off?
The rear door of the Helio. And I had prepared some food, a satellite radio, and some basic stuff. We made little boxes with little parachute drops. So Mike Maurer flew out there. We found him. He was not at an airstrip. He was out on some rolling hills. It wasn't tropical jungle, but it was kind of some rolling hills out in a not known to be a very safe, politically safe area. Not a place that we would want to go without planning. And now Dick's, with a downed helicopter there, on top of a hill. There was a river nearby. So we found him and kind of circled overhead, kind of got a grasp of the situation. And then I pushed the stuff out the door and saw it float down to him. And then Dick was able to communicate with us by the HF radio of the helicopter while the battery was still charged. But he'd had major engine trouble, lost oil pressure. It was not in a good, not
it was fly. Coming down.
You're not.
You might as well make it a landing.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about a helicopter is, it's a lot easier to do that than it is in an airplane. So he was able to make a perfectly safe landing. There was no damage at all. It was not an accident because of a landing accident or anything like that. But we had engine damage.
So the reason you took the door off was to drop supplies from the air.
Sure. Yeah.
Do an airdrop and drop in supplies that you.
That's a pretty standard procedure that we teach here is airdrops, precision airdrops. We do it during a mountain week to prepare whether you're dropping letters or actually supplies. There are plenty of times where we want to be able to drop stuff out without actually landing an aircraft there. So we did that, and then we didn't have another helicopter, and there was no airstrip there, so we couldn't land the airplane there. And it was only a 25-minute flight, but you can get a long way in 25 minutes in a place like the Philippines. So we called the military and said, hey, would you be willing to fly me, the mechanic, out there, and so that I could, because we had sort of a good reputation with the Philippine military, but they had no interest whatsoever in helping us at the time. So at least with their helicopter, but they did say what we'll do is we'll send a bunch of soldiers with you and, watch over you while you're fixing the plane. I'm like, oh, well, okay, I guess. So the military, they said, give us a few hours. Later that afternoon, they showed up with a big military truck, like a military dump truck, basically, with 21 soldiers in the back. I climbed in the back of the dump truck with my tent and some tools and some odds and ends that I had ready. And we ended up, it was almost a couple hours before dark. So we drove as far as we could to the nearest town that night. And I ended up staying at somebody's house. I don't even know who. And stayed there that night. And then the next morning, me and the 21 soldiers started hiking. And we hiked 7-8 hours to finally get to where the helicopter was from the roadhead. And when I got there, it became obvious that the school teacher wasn't there. And I'm like, what happened? And Dick Allred was telling me, it's like, oh, well, a few hours ago, the military sent their helicopter in because the news, the Philippine news had heard about that the helicopter had gone down, and they wanted to, and the military was like, well, if we can get good news coverage, we'll send a helicopter with the news crew. So Mike Maurer actually flew in while I'm hiking, with these soldiers. Mike got to ride in with the news crew. He hung out with Dick Allred, and then they flew the school teacher back out. Dick stayed with the helicopter to help me, do repairs. So when I got there, the school teacher was gone, and Dick was sitting there, and he had a lot more supplies than he had the day before. I'm like, where'd all this stuff come from? He's like, well, Mike brought it in with the helicopter. I'm like, what in the world? Here I am hiking. So anyway, it was kind of funny, but I set up camp that night.
It makes you appreciate aviation because you can get there.
You can get there a whole lot quicker.
But
I was tired and
worn out before the work started.
It was a fairly large hill, and the soldiers basically put up a big perimeter all around the base of the hill, and they left us alone. We hardly interacted with them over the next 3 or 4 days. But they were there to keep us safe. I mean, nothing happened. We never saw anybody, but they were there just in case something happened. I never felt like it was too unsafe. It was a beautiful place. Dick and I worked all day, and then at night we went down to the creek, and we were able to.
But isn't that something though, that it's a place of instability, but yet that missionary still goes in there and works without that? Wow,
they're amazing people. So way tougher than I am. But the event was kind of fun. We ended up pulling all 6 cylinders. We found a broken connecting rod, broken piston, and had to change a piston, connecting rod, cylinder, and then flush the whole engine because there were pieces of metal everywhere. And that's why we lost oil pressure, because the pickup tube was just jam full of metal, and there were pieces of metal all throughout that engine. But we were able to drop in a can of like 3 gallons of solvent and a little hand pump. So I started at the top of the engine, and I just kept flushing this solvent down through the engine, and I would catch it all in a bucket, and then I would filter it through one of our T-shirts, and then we just repeated this 20 times. So we cleaned out. The Hiller had an external oil tank, so we had external oil tank to clean out, lines to clean out,
all the galleys, and
get the oil pump and everything cleaned out as best we can, and then. Eventually, we felt like things were as clean as we could make them there. And again, the whole point of this exercise is just for a one-time ferry flight to fly it 25 minutes back to home base. We knew this engine was toasted. This engine is never going to do a real flight again. We want to just be able to safely get it home. And so we did all this work for 25 minutes of flight time. And in the end, we were able to get it back together. And but JAARS has a rule: anytime we do a ferry flight like this, only essential crew are on board. So we finished it that evening. We had started it up several times, cut open the oil filter, make sure that there was no metal to speak of, in the oil filter. I felt after several oil filters, we went through 5 or 6 oil filters, we'd run it for longer and longer periods of time. On the last one that we cut up, and I ran it basically for 30 minutes. It's a 25-minute flight. Cut that 30-minute filter open. There was hardly any metal in it at all. I'm like, okay, we can fly this home. So put the last oil filter on, and I started hiking out about 4 a.m. with the soldiers. And we had been on the radio with Mike Maurer back in Bagabug, and the whole plan was Mike would fly out with the Helio and circle overhead while Dick took off in the helicopter, and then they would fly back together in case Dick had any other problems. And so, but it was a long hike. It was a very long hike back out, and the soldiers for some reason wanted to take a different route. And it was a funny story. I like telling the story because they put me in the middle of this 21 soldiers, and it's pitch dark. There was no moon, and we're hiking out at like 4 a.m. And they told us that this is not the safest place, so we want to keep quiet and don't be talking a lot. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And so we're starting to hike, and we're probably an hour into this hike. It's like 5 a.m. It's still dark out, and I'm following the guys in front of me, and there's probably 10 guys in front of me or 10 and 11 behind me. And I look back, and there's no one behind me.
Oh my!
Just the guys in front of me, and I'm like, I start tapping the shoulder of the guy in front of me. I'm like, hey, the guys behind me, they're not there anymore. And they're like, we all stop, we all huddle up, and they're looking around, and then you hear them start to kind of call really quietly, like, I don't remember the name. I'll just make them the name, but they're like, Jorge, Juan, and no one responds, and 30 seconds later, they're yelling a little louder. And after about 2 minutes, they're just yelling at the top of their voice, trying to get the other party. And then they're shining their flashlights. And I'm like, wow, we're trying to be under the radar here. And we just advertise ourselves to everyone.
You felt exposed.
But there had been like, we were traveling along the top of a hill, and there were these 2 hills, and the group behind me had veered off to the right, and we'd gone straight or something. And we start seeing lights on this other hill way off there, and about 20 minutes later, they come trudging up and catch up to us. But it was just funny. We were trying to be all quiet, and here we are making a mess of things. But dawn came up, and I remember seeing the Helio in a distance fly over to where we had been camped. And then about 20 minutes later, both the helicopter and the Helio flew off tandem
right
back, and that was really cool to see. But then I had another 10 hours of hiking or whatever, and I remember it was kind of humorous because my wife was back in Bagabug, and she told me later on that the whole center had showed up to the hangar, and they had like a welcome home for Dick Albright and Mike Maurer, big thing, and they were all excited, and everybody, the whole center was there, and there's probably 50 people, and then. But I wasn't there, and then so I got home after dark. Jan had like spaghetti prepared for me, and I was just so glad to be home. I was tired, but it was kind of fun.
No welcome party for the mechanic. No welcome party
for the mechanic, but it was fine. It was great.
But that says it, doesn't it?
It was right on the verge of not being able to do. But it was kind of cool because the load that the helicopter happened to be taking was 3 chalkboards. So I actually spread one chalkboard on the left side of the helicopter, one chalkboard in the front, and one chalkboard. And I had cylinders all laid out. I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I have the best workbenches. It didn't rain a single time we were out there. So I was able to just organize everything on these chalkboards as far as all the 6 cylinders and all the parts. And it was perfect. It worked out just great. It was fun.
But when the vision for Bush Week came, where you take the young apprentices and the pilots and pre-field orientation out to do a Bush Week where they live in the woods and they prepare and fix, and it's really based on real life experience because you've done it. So it's not like some exaggerated event. It really did. It really did happen to you.
It can happen. It's happened to others. You walk around the hangar. I'm not the only mechanic to ever have to do anything like that. But what it causes you to do is realize what you're capable of. Until you go through something like that, you don't have the confidence that, hey, I could do something like that.
Right.
So I was a young mechanic and being asked to do something like, oh, this sounds fun, but can I do this? And
how do I know
this is going to work? And so, until you've done it, you don't really know. And so I want to try to simulate an exercise that gives the mechanics confidence that, hey, right now I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I know that I am going to do it. I'll figure it out. And that's a great place to be.
So for our listeners, just explain some of your role as an aviation mechanic. You touched on it there. You're at one of our home bases where we have a hangar, and your first assignment was the Philippines before that closed down. But just kind of paint a picture for them. We've interviewed several pilots already on our podcasts, but as an aviation mechanic, nothing flies without a mechanic. So help our listeners visualize some of your role in your first assignment.
I've spent most of my career in smaller centers. The Philippines was a great place to start. We had
By center, you mean?
small mission community base. We in the Philippines we had a northern center and a southern center, in Bagabag and Nasali. And so my main assignment was in Bagabag, which was about an 8-hour drive north of Manila. And that was home for us. And we spent almost 7 years there. And it was a small aviation center. We had a Hiller helicopter and 1 to 2 Helios, depending on what was going on. And so I was the only dedicated mechanic there. And we would have anywhere from 1 to 3 pilots, depending on what was going on. And so my job was to keep the helicopter working and with as little downtime as possible. And during those 7 years, that was my main job. But we also ended up crashing a couple of those, and it was major work to get them back up in the air again. So that was a big part of my time there, was keeping, doing major restoration projects on planes that had damage. We're not looking for accidents to happen, but when they happen, we want to be as responsible to get them back in the air as quickly as possible. So we did have a couple events in the Philippines where one time plane ground looped at the end of the runway, and one time we had a helicopter with a forced landing.
Help us understand a ground loop.
A ground loop. This was at an island in the Pacific, way up northern Philippines, almost to southern Japan, and took off, and the runway basically ends at the ocean. So when the pilot took off, he's gaining altitude, and a big downdraft forced him back onto the end of the runway, and he had a choice of running through the rocks into the ocean or trying to ground loop the plane and keep it out of the ocean, which was a wise choice.
Ground loop is a maneuver that the pilot can do to avoid greater damage. It's where you put the tail of the aircraft first, and you're going to bend some metal, but everybody's going to walk away. If he would have kept going, could have been
really bad.
Yeah.
But that was as a mechanic, I love a good accident where no one gets hurt. I mean, not supposed to say that, but it provides a wonderful maintenance challenge that I never get to see under normal situations. And I like challenges, and fixing stuff that's broken is always kind of fun. So this was a great opportunity. Unfortunately, it was our only airplane at the northern center, so I had to get on the radio and call our pilot that was down in the southern center, Ken Van Weerthuizen. So he flew up to Bagabag the next day, and I had everything ready. During the ground loop, one of the main landing gear shock struts had popped off and had wedged between the battery box and the firewall, which, as the whole plane kind of fell down onto this broken shock strut, the wing ended up about 4 or 5 inches from the ground. So the wing never touched, the prop never touched, which was awesome. But we had to change the landing gear and the main landing gear shock strut. Later on, do repairs to the whole engine mount attach point. But then the tail was also damaged. So I wasn't going to be able to really repair the whole tail, but we were able to do temporary repairs that worked to fly it home. But I'll vividly remember it was at the end of a runway. We try to keep trees away from the runway. That's kind of the whole point. So it was out there in the hot sun, and I remember no shade. And Rundle and Judy Marie, which were the translators there, amazing couple that spent their whole life dedicated to this people
group
at this village. It was amazing how well they were received at the village and the amount of influence they had had and how they had changed the culture. And there was a vibrant church in that community. And I remember Rundle wasn't much of a mechanic, so he wasn't really helping me, but he was there making sure that logistics were taken care of. So I remember saying something about being hot, and he's like talking to them. And about a half hour later, a bunch of the villagers came out and they were carrying 2 trees, about 6-8 inches wide. And they dug a hole on either side of the tail of the plane, and they put these trees. So I was a real shade tree mechanic there for about a day and a half while I fixed. And then when we were done, they just yanked the trees out, and it was awesome. It was great. But I spent
transplanted some trees for shade.
For shade, I was there 2 or 3 days fixing that plane, and I remember one of them was in the evening. We worked till dark, and after dark, we're walking back. The translator there was like, "Hey, you gotta go to church with us this evening." I'm like, "Okay, but I won't understand a thing they're saying." He's like, "No problem." So we went to church. It was like an hour and a half service, and we're just sitting there. And I didn't know what they were saying. But afterwards, we were debriefing back at the house, eating supper. He's like, "You know what they're saying?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Well, they were praying for you the whole time." And I was like, "Wow, that was really impactful," because I was, we go there to win souls and affect people, and here these people are praying for me, and wow. It was really cool. It was amazing to see how well those people had received the gospel, because it doesn't always happen that way. Right. But that was an amazing,
and internalized it so that they're not just the receiver; they were praying for you, and
that's right,
and looking beyond their needs and. Yeah, it's humbling.
It was very humbling, and I would have never had that opportunity had we never had that accident. So I was thankful for it, even though the circumstances weren't the best.
Yeah. So 3 days, that's it?
That was it for that one. But then it was probably 3 weeks to a month fixing it for real back home. Yeah. So there was a lot of twisted metal, and the goal is to make it safe enough to get home. That's always a judgment call. And even back then, though, this was in probably 2002, I had a sat phone. So I'm in the middle of the Pacific, in the middle of nowhere, on this island that's maybe 5 miles across. And I'm calling back here to JAARS, talking to the crew here. Like, this is what I want to do. Is this reasonable? And they're like, we're not there, but it sounds reasonable. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually a cool segue into field support, where headquarters here has mechanics, some guys that you aren't alone out there. You can bounce the repair off. Very seldom
are we all having to make decisions all alone anymore.
Yeah.
That's just not the world we live in.
But that's really uncharted, right? When an aircraft slides off a runway and bends metal, you have manufacturer's guidelines, you have experience. What prepared you to talk a little bit about getting to that point where all of a sudden you're the only mechanic, and you have some support back here, but you received quite a bit of training, but a lot of that is still uncharted, where you have to make those decisions. And
I grew up fixing things and building things, and in high school, my dad and I built a boat. And when I went to Moody Aviation in Tennessee, and while I was there, I built a sailboat and a couple other boats, a canoe, and kind of learn how things are built, and I did a lot of stuff on my own, and so I just like fixing and repairing things, and so when you're out there,
natural aptitude,
you kind of look at, is this reasonable? And in aviation, there's so many times where we have legal rules, and this is how you have to do this, this is how you have to do that, and there's really not a lot of leeway. But on a ferry flight in that type of situation, we can sometimes use a bit of our creativity to make it. I mean, it's on us if it doesn't work. The tricky part with that repair was we often will make a repair and do like a little test flight to see if it's going to work. Well, we're on this small island on a one-way strip that is 30 feet from the ocean, so it's got to work. So I'm not a pilot at all. So I told our pilot that was there, I said, the best we can do, because the whole tail was messed up, and I didn't even know that tail surfaces were working right, that you had reasonable control. So I said, we need to do several high-speed taxis, it's a helio, it's a tail wheel plane. So we got to get the tail up in the air and make sure you have good tail control that seems reasonable. I mean, there's a certain amount of checks and balances we can do on the ground, but it's nothing like flying. And so Ken did that, and I'm watching from behind, and it's looking good. But so he finally, when we felt like it was a reasonable thing to do, he took off, did a circle around the island, and then blasted off for the mainland. But it was at least 25 minutes over water, if I recall correctly. So you kind of need to know that it's going to work.
Yeah, the pressure on the mechanic is, it's just crazy to make sure that your expertise and ability to fix is tested one time. Were you in the airplane when he took off?
No. You're
like, I'm going to stay on the ground.
It was an awkward situation because we had the pilot that was in the accident, and then we had another pilot that came up. And normally we don't let the pilot that's in an accident fly until they've been rechecked out. But
right.
We have 2 pilots in the country and 2 planes that need to get off the island. So we called back here to JAARS and got a waiver for that requirement. So I actually was in the second plane, the undamaged plane that took off later. And then we followed them back. Yeah. So.
Well, that's an amazing story, Dave. And how long were you in country? A couple years, or
we went to the Philippines in 2001. We had a furlough in there, but we finished up in 2007 or 8, early 8.
I mean, prior to going out and fixing this aircraft.
I'd been there, I believe, a year and a half.
So not long.
Not long, no.
Yeah,
I was pretty young. I was 25, I think.
Yeah,
when we went there. So yeah, 25, 26.
All our listeners have uncharted moments of their life. When a kid is born or a grandchild comes or a new job. But there might be some listening that are a young family and they're like, hey, is this something we could do? I'm an auto mechanic. I'm a whatever. Those first years where you're like, yeah, I'm going to pack up my family and go to the Philippines. Pull us back into that time period. You've been with JAARS now 25 years, 26 years.
I think it comes from being convinced this is what you are being called to do. When I was in high school, I grew up on the mission field, and to me that was just normal. And I felt like when I was a junior in high school, I needed to find out what God wanted me to do with my life. And I felt the need to go on a missions trip, which sounds funny because at the time I'm in Colombia, South America.
Right.
And I feel like I need to go on a missions trip. And
because that was just day to day.
That was normal. That was
your life.
My home. Yeah. So I went on a summer trip with Teen Missions International, which changed my life. And,
no kidding.
Can't say enough about Teen Missions. It was an incredible experience. Went to Papua New Guinea, and was challenged in so many ways on that summer trip. And I came back home convinced that I needed to be involved in missions myself. And that's not, while it's most missionary kids are exposed to it, I have a whole ton of friends that I grew up with that aren't involved in missions at all. So it's not necessarily a default. But for me, after doing that trip to New Guinea, I was convinced this is what I wanted to do. And I was also convinced that I hated flying because my dad was a pilot, and I had flown in every plane that we had and thrown up in just about every plane we had. And I hate flying. I fly when I have to.
Well, how do you really feel about it?
I'll take a boat or a motorcycle or a four-wheel drive truck any day. But I see the need for it, and I totally understand it, but I don't like flying. But I knew I wasn't going to be a pilot, and I always liked fixing things. And, you know, at the time, I would tear things apart and sometimes get them back together, but over time, I've gotten better and better at that. So I thought this maintenance is something I could do. My wife had similar experiences, and we were both, when we were married, convinced that we were supposed to be in missions. So nowadays, it's a lot easier to someone take a vision trip and see if you like it. You know, 25 years ago, you still could have done that, but we didn't have the money to do that. It wasn't like we could go spend $5,000 and, you know, try something out for a month, see if we liked it. When we went to the Philippines, we moved our family to the Philippines. We had 2 little kids at the time, and we're like, this is what God's calling us to do. We're going to go do it. And so that's what we did.
And God provides.
He does.
You know.
The Philippines was a challenging country to work in. I learned so much as an aviation mechanic. And yeah, we were there till 2007, 2008 when the program was winding down. We left before it completely closed, but the end was in sight. And they were flying very little. The need for a full-time mechanic had come and gone. And so we were looking for what our next assignment would be when we heard about an opportunity to go to Peru with Sam Air and on loan to Sam Air. So that was exciting. And
Sam Air is a partner mission, part of the JAARS Alliance. When the SIL program closed down in Peru, Sam Air took over ensuring that there's predictable, repeatable service there. Sure. And so you went as a JAARS mechanic working under Sam Air. Yep. Great partner mission there, doing great things. So I want to talk about the time you came to Brazil. I was, why are you laughing? Pilot mechanic, and we had a heavy inspection to do on our Helio and floats. That was Mike Bunn was the caretaker pilot mechanic for that aircraft. But I was there caring for that aircraft and flying it while Mike was on furlough, and you came to do a wing pool.
At the time, we didn't have a lot of Helio mechanics because we're kind of phasing out of Helio. So I was eligible, and I was like, man, I can go back to South America and I can work all day with my buddy Craig. That'll be a great thing. And it was a little bit of a bait and switch because I was expecting to work with you all day, every day, and have a great time. But, like normal, it was just me and my John Denver over there, playing in the corner, working on a plane, which as a mechanic, I don't mind at all. I think our mechanics, some of our programs are large and we work in big groups. I've always worked in small programs where it's usually me by myself or maybe me and another person. So being able to do that is a pretty key thing
I
as a mechanic.
intended to work with you.
Yeah. So it was funny, though, because I did get one helper. I don't remember his name, a Brazilian guy that spoke Portuguese, but he knew a little bit of Spanish. So I'm a native English speaker, but I do know Spanish. So I'm speaking Spanish to this guy who's translated into. So when it came time to actually pull the wings, we went out to the highways and byways and got a bunch of people to help lift the wings, but they only spoke Portuguese. So I'm speaking Spanish to, what was his name? Marcelo, who was then translating to
good friend Marcelo
to Portuguese. And we did manage to get the wings on and off without too much damage. So
the God story that I remember was you were there, found corrosion in the attach points where the wings attached to the fuselage, and you needed to replace those. You had brought them down hand carry just in case you needed to replace them. But you, one thing that just impressed me over the years is your curiosity and your attention to detail. Tell us about those attach points.
Yeah,
which are really complicated to put on. You have to peel back the skin and put a lot of rivets in, and so you wanted to make sure.
So the Helio Courier is an older plane built in the 60s and 70s, and it has a steel carry-through. So the way the wings attach to the fuselage, the attach points are super highly critical. It doesn't have a wing strut to help aid it, and
two.
Yeah,
right?
we had found over time that there had been some problems with these attach points. So it was a known issue. That's actually the whole reason I was being sent to Brazil was to check on these fittings on this plane. So no way to see them unless you pull the wings. And so I had taken parts down there that the machine shop here had made to change if needed. We didn't want to change them unless they had to be. But we did pull the wings and looked at them, and sure enough, they weren't right. They needed attention. And so, like I say, I was just down there by myself. I'm not bitter about that. You weren't helping me at all. But I'm looking at, I pulled the old ones out and I'm going to put the new ones on. And we have, I don't know how many checks and balances here at the JAARS Center with parts that we make. But it just goes to show that sometimes, even with all the checks and balances in the world, things sometimes get missed. And when these parts had been made, the final bevel angle that meets up against the fuselage was a few degrees off.
And by a few degrees, a few thousandths.
It wasn't right. They would line them up to the old one, and it was, I wouldn't say
180 degrees out.
I wouldn't say it was painfully obvious because I looked at him like, that doesn't look right. So I waited till you were done with work. I remember calling you down like, Craig, please confirm with me. Am I not losing my mind? These parts don't look right. And you looked at it and like, we looked at it together and we're like, man, that doesn't look right. So I called, I remember getting on the phone that night and calling back here at JAARS, talking to the main guy. He's like, I know it's right. It went through all our checks and balances. It's got to be right. But he's like, but I'll go check. And I explained the problem to him. And about an hour later, we called back and he's like, Dave, I don't know how to tell you this, but the whole batch, that final bevel angle was made wrong.
It was 180 degrees out.
And it got through all our checks and balances. So that was painful. We had to figure out how to get new parts down there that were correct in the next week. And kudos to JAARS. They were able to get me proper parts a week later, and I was able to get them changed out. It was really close there at the end, but we were able to do it, and that Helio continued to fly for quite a while. So
yeah, but just that curiosity, I think, is a great attribute to have. Where just because the part is labeled and in the blister, the package, you still double checked it. And
well, I think we got to do that. In aviation, we have to do that. And so we train our mechanics here to be careful. We train them to be curious. I want confident, competent mechanics is what I always try to say, is what we're trying to train. We always have a double inspection wherever we can. We try to have it be someone else. I worked in a program where I was the only mechanic. So I would often be my own second inspector, but I would always finish the job and I would kind of take a break. And I would come back later and inspect it. And believe it or not, there's times where I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking.
Who was that mechanic?
I don't like that. Whoever did that job needs to be fired. So I did occasionally redo some work that I really I could have done better. Anytime we have a larger center with more people, it needs to be a second person, just to separate fresh eyes that aren't involved with the first type of repair. It's just kind of
as a mechanic, you expose yourself to that.
So yeah,
do it.
We're not an island, and we have to be the kind of people that are always willing to have our work evaluated and make sure we do it right.
So back to the Brazil trip. Part of the email I wrote was, "Hey, come and help, and I'll take you fishing."
Yeah, come and help. We'll work together for a month, and we'll go fishing. I think those were the words. And so the working together didn't happen, but I do remember eating a lot of suppers at your house, which was great. And but then I really wanted to go fishing in Brazil because we wanted to get some peacock bass, and so we finally made it happen.
The last day,
the last possible day it could happen. We were going to camp out on the river somewhere, I remember, and it was supposed to be a full moon. You said last time I checked, trust a pilot, but we decided that, if I remember right, whoever caught the biggest peacock bass was going to buy steak dinner for the other guy.
Yep.
And
Brazilian steakhouse.
Yeah.
Churrasco.
I remember on the first day, we caught a whole lot of fish, but no peacock bass until I finally lit into one. It was a giant. It was huge.
Right.
I got it all the way up to the boat and who you were going to net it. And
I had to net.
Somehow you didn't get it in the net. I did all the work and it flipped out of the boat and you said it didn't count.
Right.
It's totally on you. So somehow you thought you were going to get out of that steak dinner. And then I remember we camped on the shoreline on this bluff and we're like, well,
pitch black.
It was pitch black. Like you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So it was just us alone in this Amazon tributary river. And we're out there in the boat trying to fish and I couldn't casting your line out. You couldn't even tell where the water ended and the canoe it was dark. And I'm like, how are we even going to get back to the campsite? Because this was a lot of current in this river. And I think we fished for an hour and like, this is absolutely pointless. We're getting bit by mosquitoes and I'm like worried we're not even going to find the campsite. But thanks to your GPS, we were able to get to the campsite. I remember going to sleep about midnight and I woke up about 1 a.m. with you shining your flashlight in my face. I'm like, Craig, what's going on? And I look over, you're still in your little hammock sleeping. I'm looking, and that was actually the moon. The moon had finally come up about 1 a.m. It was so bright you could read by it.
Yeah.
So I woke you back up like, hey, should we go fishing again? But we were so tired, we just went back to sleep. So it was great though. We did. I think the next day, if I remember right, I caught the world's smallest peacock bass. It was about 6 inches long, but it was the only peacock bass we caught for the whole trip. So
I
caught
got you dinner.
I think you did buy me dinner, and it was well earned, if I might say.
For years after that,
I'm not bitter.
You're not bitter, but you signed every email to the guy that let my fish get away. But good memories, Dave, and it's so cool to be chatting with you now years later on a podcast, and just all the stories of God's faithfulness to your family. Talk a little bit about the Apprentice program, and then specifically the Bush Week that you just led them through, where
Sure.
it seems kind of radical and crazy to have these mechanics live out in tents in the woods, but you've done that multiple times, so
We're talking about uncharted waters, and my wife and I joined the mission to go to these countries and keep our aviation, program going. That's why we went. And when we had to kind of come back in 2014 because one of our kids needed some ongoing education issues. We needed to be back in the U.S. and I just wasn't sure what I was going to do. And an opportunity came up with the training department under John Damon to start being a maintenance trainer, and that had never really crossed my mind. I'm more of a doer than at least at the time. I'd never really trained or taught classes or anything like that, and I wasn't sure if it would be a good fit. But I got into the training department back in 2018. Started mentoring students and found out that I really actually enjoyed it. And I enjoy it more and more almost every single day. And so when we started the apprenticeship program a year and a half ago, it was a natural fit for me to take over the lead for that. And most of our apprentices are 25 and under, so they're twice my age. And but I just really enjoy it. They want to be here, and these are young mechanics with little experience.
they have their certification. They're legal mechanics.
That's correct. But the program is designed to take people that have very, very little experience and get them the experience they need in 2 years before we would send them overseas. Where in the past times, we want people to go get experience elsewhere, come to us pretty much ready, and do a little bit of training for 4 months and send them overseas. So it's a whole different paradigm, how we do training. And JAARS, to be honest, wasn't really sure how well it was going to work. I mean, I think the jury is still out, but we have been very happy with how the program's going so far. We're into the apprentice program a year and a couple months, and the group that God's brought us has been great, and I've just enjoyed working with people that are excited about getting out and doing things.
So what does experience look like? So maybe you grew up in the city and you had Uber and Lyft and you didn't even mow your lawn, and now God's calling you into mission aviation, or maybe you were a Kansas farm boy or girl and have tons of equipment experience. But we are noticing folks coming to missions with less experience. So what does getting experience look like in the apprentice program or in general?
Yeah. I've designed the program to try to take people that really, I don't know, maybe from experience, but I don't trust a lot of our AMP schools. So I want to know that they have all the basics covered. So we go over all the basics, and to some that have had really good training, it might be a little slow start, but I need to know that the basics are covered before I can start trusting them. But we do a long class on the Cessna 206 where we go over every system. I talk about all the flight control systems, engines, fuel systems, everything. And by the time they're done with that class, they know that aircraft backwards and forwards, and that we use that as a platform to make sure that a lot of the general aviation stuff is taught. So that's really good. And then once that's done, they can start doing inspections on that aircraft type. And so we lead inspections on that, and they get to kind of get their hands dirty and see what an inspection looks like and what our processes are there. And then we go from there. We do all kinds of other good stuff. We've got a Cessna 180 that we're doing a complete and total restoration on, stripped down to nothing. There's no wires, no plumbing at all.
Just a shell. Most of the skin the sheet metal's been replaced.
We have changed probably 90% of the skins on it, some of the stringers. And it's a work in progress. It's going to take several years to get it completely done. But the goal is that they will have done a project to that level, which will give them confidence. We have a room that we call the ARC room. And I called it the ARC because I'm pretty well convinced that if we had airplanes back in Bible times, Noah would have been a great aircraft mechanic, because he spent 100 years building the Ark. And sometimes it takes that kind of dedication to get some of the aviation projects done. So I wanted a room where we could do long-term projects, something about starting something, tearing it apart, and completely going through it from start to finish. In a project that takes 2 to 3 years, oftentimes we might have 10 different crews working on it. So learning how to work on a project and then be able to hand it over to another team successfully, carefully and successfully, hand over information, pass on leadership. They're learning all kinds of things besides just
running a project,
how to fix an airplane.
Project management. Because you can graduate a maintenance A&P school and aviation tech school. A&P is airframe and power plant maintenance, without touching an entire aircraft. And so
a lot of schools never touch live work in their A&P school year. So
they have a module, like a piece of sheet metal that they paint or do corrosion control, but you're doing it to the entire aircraft. And that's the experience part.
We're our first group of apprentices are well into it. Our next group starts in January. In that next group, I've got 6 apprentices. 4 of the 6 have never touched a live aircraft. This oftentimes people come to us for an evaluation, and they're the right type of people that we want. But in the past, if they didn't have the experience, we would say, go get some more experience. And then they would, but they're really good people. So they get a job and they get promoted at their job and get a pay raise and buy a house, and they never come back to us, which, so we've seen that. So we're like, let's do something different, where these really good people, we can take them and train them the way we need them to be.
So how would you describe the right person?
I'm looking for a little bit of an adventurous spirit that can also be super trainable, loves Jesus, wants to serve. Those are the kinds of things that are really important to me. We can train a lot of technical stuff, but we need the right kind of people. Yes. I'm really glad that we won't have airplanes in heaven, but I see how
there's a quote.
I can see how they are amazingly useful. So it's an amazing tool that God's allowed us to live in a time where we can use this tool. But I work with guys that can listen to a plane like, oh, that's this guy. I couldn't care less. That to me, but I love the mechanical challenge of taking this thing and making it safe to fly. And there's a lot of different kinds of mechanics, and it takes a lot to make the world go round. So
you have the Ark. It's an amazing, sterile, safe environment to learn in. It's separated from the shop floor with other maintenance. But the flip side of that is you take them out in the trees and say, fix this airplane. Tell us a little bit about Bush Week. I know there's a video. A lot of our listeners have watched it, but the more recent one where you did it with apprentices, you actually took it to a new level. Tell us about that.
The way we train aviation mechanics, there are a lot of rules and regulations we need to follow. We do things right, and we do things safely. We do them the right way all the time, every time.
Follow manufacturers' guidelines.
And when we're in the hangar, we have procedures about how to do procedures, and it becomes somewhat of a sterile environment, especially for new trainees that aren't running the projects yet. It can be a little discouraging where we're like, well, how much are we actually thinking, and how much are we actually just doing what the manual says, and how much outside the box can we do? Because mission aviation, when you read the old books, it's like it's always some fly-by-night operation in the middle of nowhere, and that's not the way mission aviation is anymore. Right. We're using multi-million-dollar aircraft, and it's different than mission aviation was when Jim Elliott was flying a bucket with a parrot. So it's a different world, and yet that hasn't come across in all literature. So I still want creativity. I want my mechanics to be thinking outside the box, even within parameters. And so JAARS has something like 600 acres here, and we have our airport that's right up against a bunch of woods. So several years ago, I dreamed of what if we got off site and did some
outside the hangar,
outside the box, outside the hangar work. And we have a Cessna 206 that flew in Papua New Guinea for many, many years, was retired from service there, that's dedicated to maintenance training. And it doesn't fly anymore. And its goal is to train mechanics. It's doing a very good job doing that. And the first time I proposed the idea to the administration, they were like, you want to do what? And I said, I want to go crash this plane in the woods and have my mechanics have to fix it. And they were like, at first there was some hesitation to teach how to fix accidents. And I was like, well, we train our pilots all the time what to do in the event of emergency. Like, it seems to me like 60, 70% of our training is what to do when things go belly up. And our pilots are always doing emergency procedure training.
Right.
Our mechanics get none of that. I'm like, yeah, this is not the norm, but what have they ever thought about what they would do when a plane might have to go down in a not a normal place and not a normal way?
Yeah.
And how we treat the injured, how we evaluate the accident, how we then, take what's given us and try to, sometimes we might be able to fix the plane. Sometimes we might just try to retrieve the plane. Sometimes the plane might be written off and stay in the jungle, and that's perfectly fine with me. But we have the 600 acres here. I was like, let's wreck this plane and see what our mechanics do. And so, because it's not a plane that actually flies, the amount of supervision legally needed is a lot less. So I can just have them. I tell them, you need to prepare this for a ferry flight, a simulated ferry flight, and so that we can get it back home where we would then do legitimate repairs. And so we've done this, I believe, 5 times now. And every other time we've done it, we've had 3 mechanics. So I try to design this as a 3 to 4 day event. But this year I had 6 mechanics because of the apprentice program. So, and I was getting kind of bored of the way I always did it. So I was like, what if we just change this up a little bit? And there's a creek back there. So I wrecked the plane, and I told them, this time I don't want you to fix it. Let's just say it's not fixable, but we want to retrieve it. So it was more an exercise in logistics. And they had to, they were given a day to, they saw what they had to do, the accident. They saw it was about a mile and a quarter long trail. They had to retrieve this entire Cessna 206. So they ended up building structure to take it apart. First of all, they had to plan for food, for tents, for water,
tools,
what equipment they needed to do, what if they needed to build anything. I gave them a day to prepare for that, and they built equipment. And then I told them the trailhead is about a mile from the accident site, that could happen anywhere. So I drove them to that, and they had to hike in through the woods, cross over a creek, and then on up to where the plane was wrecked. And at that point, it was up to them. It's designed as on them, and I pick a different leader every day, and so they all practice leadership, and they have to cook out there. And
it's their project. It's not like you're holding their hand. You're there for safety and overwatch, but not.
It can be really hard as an instructor to watch them be like, what are you doing? But as much as I can, I try to let them run with it. It's designed as a learning thing. So if things are done incorrectly or there could be a better way, we debrief it later and try to get as much out of it. And all 6 of them come with a different skill set. Right. And so they would all tell you they were excited about it. When it was done, they were exhausted, and it wasn't quite as much fun as they thought. And it was a lot of work, but they all learned a lot. And it's a long enough project that, the fun wears away after day 2, and it becomes like work. And then it becomes, you're not sleeping well because you're out there in tents and hammocks or whatever, and it's raining. And so it's designed as hopefully to get to the point where the fun wears off and we see real people struggling with really hard things.
Right.
And then how we work together as a team when the fun wears off.
Yep.
That really is what we're trying to get down to.
And make sure the fruits of the Spirit don't wear off too.
That's right. It was a very difficult, it was by far the most difficult bush week we've done. They had to build rigging to actually cross a creek that's probably 20, 25 feet wide and 12 feet deep with a 500-pound engine and a 1,000-pound fuselage and wings, and then cart it almost a mile at that point through a very tight trailhead. Then they had to load it on a trailer, try to get everything on one truck bed and one 18-foot trailer, and they were able to do that, and then tie it down in such a way that it can go on a rough jungle road, which we were able to simulate well, and get it
That's
back.
amazing.
Get it back to the hangar. Once it was back to the hangar, they had to reassemble it legit and fix it legit, and so it would be ready for service again. So I think it's an excellent exercise. The goal being to kind of break things down to where things really get hard.
Right.
And during this event, they're away from their families. They don't have their cell phones. So we're unplugged, uncharted, and it's a lot of fun, but it gets to the point where it's actually really hard.
Yeah, and that's the point. They say that missionaries come back from the field not because of the work, but because of struggles with other missionaries and missionary relationships. And so you're able to simulate an event where the honeymoon's over and it's really hot. It's challenging.
The poison ivy and the mosquito bites
don't go away.
That's not simulated. That's legit. Yeah. This kind of thing is not the norm. And
but you don't get to predict or
don't join
when it
Mission
happens.
Aviation because, hey, you saw a Bush Week video and you liked what you saw. Join Mission Aviation because God's calling you to do hard things in hard places, and you're convinced that that's what God wants you to do, because you could go years and never, ever do anything like that. And it could be sitting in a tropical hangar, like I say, by yourself, listening to John Denver, doing repeated events over and over and over and over again. And
the mundane inspection.
Keeping planes safe, knowing that what your job as a mechanic is doing is keeping our missionaries safe as they travel to some very, very hard places.
So what excites you most about what you're seeing in this next generation of mechanics that are going to go do hard things in remote places of the world?
One of the guys I'm training, just a couple of them just love drones, and they can do amazing things with drones. And I'm old school, like
living in that tension of history and experience, but not letting history and experience be a prison or a box you can't get out of. So being stretched to think of new ways.
We're talking about like I had a class where, like, hey, what if we had to open up this new airstrip? We're showing them airstrip drawings of how we need to do elevations and slopes. And one of my guys is like, and I said, what we do is we drive in there, we hike out there, and we pace it off, and we measure, and we use this, thing to measure this slope. He's like, oh, that's cool and all. He's like, but I could actually just fly my drone out there, and I could fly it down the center line, and it would give you much more accurate angles to everything, and it would do it in minutes. I'm like, oh, yeah. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, but can you tell me how firm the surface of the runway is? He's like, oh yeah, I can't do that. So there's a balance, because I can actually walk the strip, and I can push a stick in the ground and see how firm it is, and so I think there's old school and new school, and figuring out how to blend those is fun.
It's a tension to be managed, not eliminated, right?
They bring stuff that I've never thought of. So they're all about 3D printers and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, show me, and then I'm like, all right, you make this out of aluminum, then we'll talk, So it goes both ways. Yeah,
but I think that's what we're trying to do.
I don't think the commitment is any less now than the commitment I had to make. When someone packs up their home and sells their house and leaves their family, and they go to, around the world, that's no easier now than it was then.
Right.
And, you're still missing family events, and families passing away, and you're on the other side of the world. And there's the people that are joining today are giving up a lot to do it, and God's got to call them. They need to be convinced that this is what God's calling them to do.
Well, Dave, I really appreciate you being here, and you've been a good friend for a long time, and I'm just glad that our listeners got to see a little bit of a window into what a JAARS mechanic does, and the importance of having folks. Not everybody flies, but nobody flies without a mechanic, and
don't always get to see the end result. We see it from a hangar,
Right.
and it can be a little discouraging at times, but knowing that that's what God wants you to do is what's going to keep you there.
The pilot's in all the videos, the mechanic isn't, but just that willingness to support and do your job and do it right without the spotlight.
That's right.
Is part of the call.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Uncharted. JAARS is a nonprofit organization that covers the last mile missions all across the globe. And if you want to learn more, go to jaars.org. You can learn where to give, where to serve, how to get involved. And if you would, like, subscribe, do all the things to the Uncharted podcast, and we hope we see you next time.